My first memory of being startled and awestruck by a plant was when I was probably 5, and I was astonished that there was this sunflower that was taller than me. I really enjoyed biology when I was in high school. My dad is a scientist, and I think what he gave me through his scientific mind was the gift of being curious and not needing to know the answer. Several times a year I offer apprenticeship programs, and in this particular circle, the first thing that we do when we gather in the morning is we sit and we drink a tea.
When we first drink our tea, we'll be really considering what is the scent. Before we even take a sip, what does it feel like on our mucous membranes? Is it warming to our mucous membranes, cooling? Is it moistening? And then when we take our first swallow, does it bring us to think of anything or bring forward a memory or some sensation in the body? And the more we sip our tea, the more we might notice these things coming forward.
So we don't know who the plant friend is that we're drinking until after we've explored our stories, our memories, our thought processes, our emotions that might have come up while we've been sitting with this plant. It allows us to really sit in the mystery for a little bit longer, because when we're in the unknowing and the mystery, we're more open to being curious. Once we know the name of a plant, we can look it up in a book. However, what we read in a book doesn't describe a lot of the energetic pieces that people bring forward, like, oh, this reminds me of a warm summer day where I was with my grandmother and I felt so loved. We're not going to read that in a book. We have to have that experience. Science, as I was exposed to it as a young person, was about asking questions and being curious. And herbalism feels like being the receptor for the curiosity and being open to whatever the answers are, whether they're quantitative or qualitative. I'm Mischa Schuler, and I'm a practicing herbalist in Portland, Maine. I offer herbal apprenticeships, client consults, and plant spirit medicine workshops. I fell in love with edible plants just out of curiosity. I stumbled upon a book, and then, one thing leads to another, and then you're out exploring, and then you're like, oh, well, who's this plant? And who's this plant? And why do you love to be next to this plant? How do you help each other? And then I went and I worked at an outdoor school, and it was while I was at this outdoor school that another staff naturalist presented me with this curriculum, and it was for an herbal medicine program, and I read through the curriculum and I had a physiological response. My hands started sweating, my heart started thumping, and I was like, oh, I have to do this. When I went to herb school, it was a phenomenal program. It was a 3-year clinical program. It was very booky, so it was very heady. At that time, learning Latin names was like the most difficult thing in the world, which is important. It was a clinical program, but it didn't necessarily create space to feel the plants, to feel the energy of the plants. And it was with the slowing down and noticing things that something in me began to shift. But at that time, I didn't even appreciate that there was this whole history of plants as medicine, despite the fact that my grandmother gave me chamomile tea if I had a bellyache. That was sort of just part of what was happening in my household, but it never occurred to me that herbalism was alive and well, or even that it was a thing. It just was what you do. So we have this scientific method, we have this very structured way of gathering information about how a plant might work in the body. And then we have folk tradition that we can read about, or grandmothers who have shared with us ways that we relate with these plants. Nothing that I do is magical. What I'm doing is really just observing, and we all have the capacity to listen and pay attention in this way. I'm an ordinary person. I live in the suburbs of Portland, Maine. There's nothing exceptional about what's happening, except for that it is. So much of the work with the plants is reminding ourselves that the mundane is actually where so much of the magic is.